Hello, everyone, and welcome to Remote, the Connected Faculty Summit. My name is Allie Forbes, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we get started, there are a few things to note. On the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a panel with a few key tabs. The chat tab allows you to interact with your fellow attendees. I see some of you have already introduced yourselves. Questions on the same box enables you to submit your questions for the speakers to answer at the end of their presentation. So at the top of that box, there's also a tab for questions. And finally, slides or other related resources can be found in the Handouts tab as well. If needed, you can resize and rearrange the panel on your screen just like you would a browser window. Click the icons on the bottom of your screen to open or close additional panels such as speaker bios, abstracts, share, and often handouts. Should you have any technical issues, please first refresh your browser. If your issue is not resolved, please submit a note in the questions tab for assistance. And our engineer who is here behind the scenes, Ryan, will be happy to help you as best he can. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand after the event. Now on to the good stuff, the presentation, Adaptive Learning Beyond STEM. Discussing today's topic is Prucha, Associate Instructor at the University of Central Florida, as well as Kacie Tartt, also an Associate Instructor from the University of Central Florida. And with that, I will turn it over to Anne and Kacie for their presentation.
You start. Hi, everyone. We are so glad that you are attending our session. About a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now, Anne and I started on this journey with adaptive learning. And so we have quite a bit to share just about our project and what we did today. And hopefully we can answer some of your questions.
Great. So one of the reasons that we are fans of adaptive learning is that it has allowed us a lot of freedom in our courses that we've redesigned to incorporate it. That freedom, with that freedom comes along the ability to deliver course content that we feel has a real world application. It's information and skills that our students can actually use in the real world. And it also, because the courses we teach, we have used traditional textbook and courseware in the past, but we have found that, of course, that content a lot of times has sort of a one-size-fits-all approach, but with adaptive learning, we can get away from that. And like I said, have a lot more freedom and make things more customized and adapted to our students.
Yeah, and so when we first got started, all of the examples that we had, especially at our university, were in STEM. It was nursing, engineering, physics, things like that. But I saw a presentation that some of our instructional designers did, and I thought, okay, this could work in our discipline too. We are both obviously instructors of Spanish, and as we all know, when you're learning a language, it's piece by piece and you're building. And so I just saw kind of an intrinsic value in that and thought we could start with our students here and build their own pathway to learning Spanish. Being in Florida, we have a lot of students who have a lot of exposure to Spanish, either because they're native speakers, heritage speakers, they, grew up in a neighborhood and their neighbors, they were surrounded by Spanish. Have had it previously in school. At our university in particular, over 25% of our student body identifies as Hispanic. So another thing we were trying to do was address some of the different levels that students come into these elementary courses at.
So moving on, we'll share a little bit with you about how we redesigned our courses. We eliminated the traditional textbook and publisher courseware that we've been using for many, many years. We used only open educational resource content plus our own content that we have created previous to the redesign as well as during the redesign. And then, of course, we employed adaptive learning. We use the software application called Realize It, although there are many different ones on the market, but our university has a contract with Realize It, and we have a very robust team of support at University of Central Florida for this application.
So one of the reasons we decided to pursue course redesign at the outset was because we had so many students, as I mentioned in the previous slide, with prior knowledge of the subject matter. If a student was coming in and let's say they had had a year in high school, we wanted them to be able to focus on the things that they needed to learn and not spend time doing the things that they already knew. So if I have a student who is proficient and knows all the conjugations of the verb ser and they can use them in a sentence, I wanted that student to be able to show the knowledge that they had through determined knowledge questions and move on in the pathway of that unit to other subjects. Also, it was challenges with the online delivery mode. Over 80% of our first year Spanish courses are delivered fully online. And so a lot of times students feel like they're in isolation, and that's not the case. So it helped us connect better with our students as well, being able to look at the path that they were on, immediately be able to see the data and the analytics, letting us know what specific students were struggling with, what all the students were struggling with as a whole, and we could go back and readdress those certain topics. In addition to that, Anne sort of touched on before, it was just the traditional textbook and courseware fatigue and the feedback on publisher content that we were getting from students, especially with that canned Spanish that they felt like they were getting. You know, with so many students who identify as Hispanic, and even those that don't and have, you know, friends or have grown up in the environment here in Florida, they felt like it wasn't representing the population well, be it whether they were from Puerto Rico, Cuba, wherever they were from. And also, it's a gen ed language requirement for most of our College of Arts and Humanities students. It's a gateway course. And so that was what the university wanted to focus on. They wanted to focus on these courses that had high numbers of students. We have over 3,000 students that go through these elementary Spanish courses each year. And that's fall, spring, and summer. And so those were some of the main reasons that Anne and I wanted to pursue the course redesign. And then she's going to talk a little bit about the university's motives and what they were looking at trying to do.
Right. So our university actually has decided to mount a campaign to support students and using adaptive learning to increase student success rates. This comes from our Board of Trustees. This redesign project, employing adaptive learning, is being administered by our Center for Distributed Learning, which is our department at UCF that is in charge of all online teaching and learning. So essentially what we want to do with adaptive learning is increase student success, which means a grade of A, B, or C, decrease our drop, fail, and withdraw rates, decrease the numbers of students who do that, and then also see if we can get, more positive student evaluations. That isn't so much from the Board of Trustees, but it is something that is important to us because we use it to inform our teaching. With the traditional textbook and publisher courseware that we had been using before the redesign, our students were paying $275, and they were using this for 1 or 2 semesters, depending on whether or not they had to take both courses in the sequence. But even if they only had to take the second course in the sequence, they still were required to spend the $275. So another result of this redesign and our project is that students no longer have to spend this sum of money, which is quite a bit for many students, and just a lot in general. So since we started this project, we estimate that students across the board have saved a total of about $115,000. And this is in the last 3 semesters in which we have taught these redesigned courses with adaptive learning.
And I would just add that these courses are 4 credit hours. And so we have managed to, right now our students are paying nothing, but we have reduced the cost to $20 or under per credit hour. So that was a goal that we had with an initiative here in Florida to decrease the cost of what students need to take the course, their materials. We have decided, I always tell people, and I tell Anne this all the time, I'm never going back. Where I'm going to continue on this path with adaptive learning because of the freedom that she mentioned earlier, but also creativity, the things that we're allowed to do in the classroom. Being informed by our students, as Anne said, has also let us know what their goals for the course are and what they're looking, to try to learn and to try to get out of our course. Not just that it's a requirement, I have to take it. With something like this, we're able to really have an open conversation with them and know what they're looking for, what they want to get out of their Spanish courses. Autonomy and customization. If there's something in the system that I see is not working for my students, I can immediately go in and change that and reset the system, and I have it in there. If I find a mistake, something that I don't like, if I want to add another answer, I'm able to do all that in a snap. And so that's really, really something that I have come to like about using an adaptive system. Also, student preference and demand. I initially, just to kind of get my feet wet, used this in a course as an optional thing where students could review before assessments. And the following semester, because we had a textbook change at our university, I made the decision to forego setting it up in that class for a semester, that I would only be using, you know, the content for 14 or 15 weeks. And I had students who came from the first level, so the first Spanish course with me, into the second, that were asking me, where is my adaptive learning? Where is my Realize It? I need it. And just the fact that it is so student-centered. Every student has an individualized path. The system, you know, progresses in such a way that it's delivering questions and content to them on things that they need extra practice with. And so that's something that for me is really, really important if I'm working toward mastery with a student and retention, which is what, you know, obviously we all want in our courses.
We really feel that the adaptive learning approach in foreign languages, and it probably is this way in many other disciplines as well, is pretty innovative and cutting edge. Between us, we have over 40 years experience teaching Spanish at the college level. And this is the first time that we have employed pedagogical tools that have really changed the game. I started teaching Spanish at the college level at Rutgers University in 1987. And the same issues that I had then and that my students had then are present today. The number one being that students come to the class with a previous set of knowledge, but yet the textbook and courseware that we use doesn't address all of those different levels of knowledge. Students bring a lot with them to the table. Some bring absolutely nothing to the table and they've never had any exposure to the language. But so this is really pretty cutting edge because it has actually eliminated a lot of the problems that I have seen for many, many years. Another one of those problems is when we use publisher courseware like ebooks and you know, online systems for doing homework and things like that. There are always technical glitches. The students don't have the right browser. They don't have the right bandwidth and all that kind of stuff. That has been virtually eliminated by us using adaptive learning. In our case, the application Realize It. This allows us to focus more on our teaching and on our students' learning. And it also allows our students to focus more on their learning. They don't have to get caught up in technical problems and trying to navigate the system. They don't have to slog through dozens and dozens of activities on concepts that they have already mastered. Again, this just really, it adapts, the system adapts to what students know and don't know, giving them a real personalized learning path. At the outset, when we created this, it was a lot of work going in, but each semester that we use it, it's less and less work. We fine-tune things here and there, but we have found it to be really, really rewarding. Another thing that's rewarding is to see some of our data that we have received from our first semester. We're waiting on our second set of data, but I would like to jump to the next couple of slides to show you a little bit about that. Unless there's something you need to add, Kacie? No? Okay, great. So our first set of data is on student success, and this is defined by a grade of A, B, or C. And our two classes are at the top of the list, SPN 1120 and 1121. And you'll notice increase of 23 and 22 points respectively. What that means is the first semester that we taught with adaptive learning in each of our courses compared to the previous semester without adaptive learning in the same courses for the same professor, that being Kacie and myself, our points went up 23 and 22%. That means that 91% of students in the courses And 91% and 87% of the students in the courses received grades or earned grades of A, B, and C. And these, again, are jumps of 23 and 22 points from the previous semester without adaptive learning. Our next set of data points to student withdrawal rates. And again, it compares non-adaptive learning semester to first semester using adaptive learning, same course, same instructors, and this went down. And so the negative numbers are great. So in Spanish 1121, Spanish 2, only 7% of students dropped or failed or withdrew. And in Spanish 1120, which is Spanish 1, only 3%. And our numbers went down there as well. And then the last set of data we have is student perception of instruction. This is what we call our evaluations, where our students actually fill out an instrument evaluating our teaching, the course materials, and the course overall. And you can see for Spanish 2, 1121, on a scale of 5, we went up almost half a point, which is pretty huge. In Spanish 1120 or Spanish 1, we went up 0.14 points out of a scale of 5 points. This 0.46 represents a really big deal to us because these are students who had taken Spanish 1 without adaptive learning and then came to Spanish 2 using adaptive learning and not using the publisher content since we eliminated that. And so this is a really big number for us because those students had a measure of comparison. The students in Spanish 1 did not, but still the numbers are good, 0.14 points out of 5. So next slide, Kacie.
Yeah. And so this will kind of give you an idea of what we've done and kind of our timeline. So in fall 2017, I was teaching 3 course sections that had that optional adaptive learning component that I told you guys about, and it affected around 100 students. I had, a little over 30 students in each section. Spring 2018 to spring 2020, we were teaching 7 to 8 course sections per semester. We generally have a teaching load of 4, but we also teach some Latin American studies courses, so it just depended. And so that was 200 to 250 students per semester. Fall 2020, we will be teaching 14 course sections. We have 2 instructors that will be joining us who are interested and wanted to do the same thing, and we're up to now we'll be up to 500 students. Additional languages in development in our department using adaptive learning are Portuguese, Italian, French, and German. As you can see, I am in the process now of converting one of my upper level Spanish grammar courses into the Realize It system using adaptive learning for them to gain the practice that they need, because in a grammar class we have a lot, all of the concepts, and we need to practice them quite a bit. And the goal would be program-wide implementation by fall of 2021. So the hope would be that all of our elementary Spanish classes would be using adaptive learning, and that would again be over 3,000 plus students per year.
So before we wrap it up here, we just want to share a few perspectives, talk a little bit about what we've learned, and give you some ideas to consider. Where to start? Kacie, I'll turn that over to you.
Yeah, I would just say to make sure, if you can, to have someone that you're working with. Mm-hmm. It helped a lot to have Anne as a partner because we were able to bounce ideas off each other. We were able to go through material, and I see a question in the chat now about evaluating material, to have somebody there, another set of eyes looking, will this work? Does this not work? What do you think? And you don't have to do what we did and go fully OER. A lot of content can be ingested from your publisher if that's what they choose. In our case, the publisher was dragging their feet a little bit. And so we just said, okay, we're on a timeline and we need to do this. And again, freedom comes in there too, because once that worked out, I felt like, oh, this was so much better than having to rely on that publisher content. So I'm glad it happened the way it did. But if you just want to kind of dip your toe in the water or start out, slow, like I did in the beginning, that's a really good way, is by ingesting publisher content.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because we went, full force ahead and created a scope and sequence, the content, etc. But you don't have to do that. You can incorporate adaptive learning on a smaller scale, like Kacie did at the beginning for review purposes. It could be for your homework activities. And And actually, I should point out here that we do use adaptive learning to deliver the content, i.e. the textbook content, and the homework practice activities, but we also use our learning management system at UCF, which is Canvas, to deliver assessments. That's where they do their writing activities. There's some cultural activities and content. So we do use adaptive learning, the adaptive learning software for our content and our practice homework activities, but not for the entire course. So just want to clarify that as well.
Yeah, and we do want to be upfront, and that, Anne alluded to this earlier. It is a lot of work, but for level of effort and the dividends after that work is completed, for me, and I think I can speak for her as well, it was completely worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. So once you make the commitment, you can have a lot of fun with it. Again, we recommend that you work with a partner or a small group, so you've got someone to share with and to collaborate with and bounce ideas off of each other. It can be fun, actually. So looking back, I mean, I would not change that at all, because working together really made it a better project and made it very enjoyable. And yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. So I think we can go to some of the questions that people have been sharing. Here is our contact information. Feel free to email us if you have any questions or would like more information. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Awesome. Thank you for your presentation, Anne and Kacie. I see that we have some questions from the audience started in the Q&A section. I'd also just like to remind all the participants here today that in the chat box, there's a section for questions. There's a questions tab. So if you want to submit your questions there, we've got about 10 minutes. That's where I'm going to be pulling them from. So our first question is from Peter. When you look at the data to identify problems a student is having, how finely grained are those problems? For example, would you see a problem in a specific topic or a problem with a specific item in a topic, such as a particular verb form?
So you can actually see both. I look at the kind of the global class data when I'm looking at maybe a large concept and just see how the class as a whole is performing. I mean, there may be someone that masters it in 2 seconds or did their determined knowledge and didn't even have to complete that node. But a lot of times you can see, and I will say, generally it's the concepts that they would have difficulties with in a face-to-face classroom. Gustar y verbos similares, conjugations in the preterite, so it's not always unexpected. But at one point there was globally and this is anecdotal, but I was noticing that there was an issue with telling time, something that I thought was so simple. And when I went back, it made sense why they were having trouble, because it was the way the question was written. So even things like that, it might be that the concept's difficult, or it might be the way the content was put into the system. So you can find things like that too. Now with individual students on a question level, same thing. And within the system, students can query a question if they have that they're having issues with. So you can get down to individual students as well. And talk just another kind of side note on the data. Particularly in Realize It, one of the things the students can do is they can click on an emoji face to tell you kind of how they're feeling about that unit or about that section. And so when I first saw that, I kind of laughed and I thought, is this valuable? Like, how would you use this? But then I noticed a couple of my students and they had little furrowed brows, knitted brows, and they weren't happy at all. And so I just individually emailed all of those students and said, what's going on? Or I saw you had a sad face and things like that. And they wrote back and they explained to me why in a lot of cases. And I was able to see that for that particular class, it happened to be heritage learners of Spanish that had grown up speaking Spanish in the home, but had not had any formal Spanish classes. And they were struggling because they were misspelling things. They were writing them, as they heard them or had seen them written maybe in their home, but it wasn't necessarily correct. So all of that data has really helped out a lot and helped me kind of be able to group students together and see what their individual problems are, but also as a whole.
Yeah, I think the data, and this is applicable to any class really, or any discipline, not just ours. And And that data can really help inform your teaching and then ultimately inform what your students learn and what they acquire.
Well, and also create connection and community in your classroom,
Yes.
which a lot of times is another challenge that you deal with in the online classroom.
Right.
Okay, great. Do you anticipate differences in dealing with undergraduate students versus graduate students?
Well, with adaptive learning and with this course redesign, we're only teaching undergraduate courses. Mm-hmm. However, we have a lot of students who are non-traditional. They might be working full-time. They might be older. It seems to work really well with them too. We're getting great feedback, great data. So we don't teach graduate level courses, but I honestly, having taken graduate level courses for two different advanced degrees, I can say that this could be applicable to a graduate level course too, because it provides a personalized path that recognizes what I already know or don't know as a student. Mm-hmm. And so it just makes it more personal, and it allows the instructor and the student to focus more on teaching and learning.
Okay, great. And as far as specific systems, which system do you use for adaptive learning? Do you have any recommendations for specific resources?
So we specifically use Realize It. I know that there are other ones out there. Alex is one that I can think of off the top of my head, but Realize It is the only one that I have personally ever used, and Anna as well.
Yeah, I just put the name of it in the chat.
Great, excellent. And I know a few people, one common question right now is if you could offer examples. I think as far as examples, just for timing wise, if someone was interested in having specific examples, is that an appropriate time for them to reach out to you?
Yes.
I know you
Absolutely.
provided, it's just one that's common, but I think just in this format, it would be pretty difficult to work through a specific example. So any of the participants who are looking for examples can certainly reach out for those.
Sure, absolutely. This presentation didn't have an objective of providing examples, but we're happy to provide them or to communicate with anybody who gets in touch with us. Feel free to email both of us at the same time, include both of us in the email. And maybe down the road, we could do a presentation where it's more of a demonstration of how we use adaptive learning. We'd be happy to.
Great. And another question here, aside from the resources, is there any literature that you recommend specific to adaptive learning for anybody who's interested in reading more about it?
We have the good fortune at University of Central Florida of being supported by our Center for Distributed Learning. That is where we read up quite a bit on adaptive learning. We also just learned a lot about it in, meeting with various colleagues. But you could certainly go to their website. I'd be happy to put it in the chat. There's also information about adaptive learning on Realize It's blog.
Yeah.
And
that's another thing I was going to say too. I mean, depending on where you Google adaptive learning, you're going to get different definitions and think they're going to say different things. I personally think the one that we've adopted at UCF, and you'll be able to see that on the website that Anne's providing as well for our Center for Distributed Learning. I think it's a really good one. I think it's clear and easy to understand. And I noticed in the chat too, someone had asked, what is adaptive learning? And I don't think that that's a dumb question at all, because I think, we're used to talking about it now, so that term just rolls off the tongue. But if I had to just kind of put it right there in the simplest or most layman terms, adaptive learning is the content adapts to the knowledge that the student has or does not have. So as they're working through the content for your course, they have a very specific pathway that is built for them by the system that is adapting constantly to the knowledge that they have or that they do not have.
Yeah, and another way to put it is that adaptive learning, it meets the student where the student is. So if the student's here, it meets the student here. If the student's down here, it meets the student down here, and really help. Yeah, that's another definition. But I put in the chat two names, UCF Center for Distributed Learning. Realize It blog also has some information on adaptive learning. I believe EDUCAUSE does as well. You might want to go into EDUCAUSE's website. So that's a start.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today. But once again, I'd like to thank Anne and Kacie for joining us today, providing us with their firsthand experience. And to all our participants, I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions. We'll see you for more sessions today and definitely some more tomorrow. And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much. We're happy to have had the opportunity.
Thank you.